Hi again, everyone. I'm Ollie Matthews. This is the Narcissistic Resistance, and this resistance video is sponsored by contribution from Diane the Invisible. And here's her story. Dear Ollie, this is Diane the Invisible again. I was inspired by your last video, Fake, the Narcissist stages their heroic acts, and wanted to tell you about a recent insight into the family heroine, my mother's mother, my sweet little old grandmother. This woman was the family paragon, above criticism, ahead of her time, and survivor of many injustices. She was also in a position to be a real hero and rescue me, and she did nothing. My mother and father met at their first jobs, both 18. My mother had good reason to want to leave her own sick household. Her criteria for a husband was tall, dark, and handsome. Check, check, check. Brains, sincerity, affection, fail, fail, fail. Her father hated the low life my mother was dating, one loser recognizing another. He forbade my parents from marrying before the age of 21. During the 3 intervening years, my prospective father never said he loved her, not once. He was wrapped in red flags and virtual red flag mummy. But she ignored this. It was more important to score a symbolic victory over her father. They married the week before she turned 21, despite the flashing warnings. Only at the very end of my father's life did I manage to get an "I love you too, babe," which sounded like a line from a drunk to a barfly. In March 2015, just before he died of Alzheimer's, age 85, I had a chance to see the real him for only one time. He was a child again, innocent, vulnerable. The last weeks were the best we ever had. Yes, he had to be out of his mind to say he loved me. I took it as bittersweet at the time. Now I think it is just sad. And I did a video about that they have to be out of their mind to actually be nice to you or love you. It's the only time I did a video for someone. Same thing happened for a woman taking care of her mother. Same deal. I never bred. I never thought my family name and DNA deserved to pass into the future. What difference did it make to be a parent anyhow? I reasoned. They had me. I did not matter. I recognized early being a parent, in fact, did not make one a parent indeed. The story about choosing to be without children is again the subject for another letter. I was hardly a blip on the event scale. He screwed around on my mother before they married and boasted about it. He insulted her in front of friends. He abandoned her in New York on their honeymoon, dodged out of the subway car, leaving her to roar off to the next station alone. No map, no money, just for fun. Message learned, never trust me. The drinking was out of control and he was verbally abusive to my mother and later physically violent towards me when he was home. He was the kind of guy who would go out for a pack of cigarettes and come home a week later. Yet my mother identified this prize as a good husband material. He also had absorbed much of the abuse from his own mother, another story. Both my parents were broken children who joined their misery actors wearing costumes that served as decoys. They were never really there. They were hiding within adopted personalities. They wore suits of armor that shut them away from their authentic selves and hid the very broken child within. They became trapped, lost within their own role-playing. Well, I mean, isn't that what narcissism is? Is lifelong role-playing, is a lifelong acting job where you're constantly in and out of costume and poses and act, scene, drama. I mean, that's what it is. That's why so many narcissists, so many actors have narcissistic personality disorder and borderline personality disorder. You can see it. It's why it's prevalent. Because they're playing roles. Classic abuse move. 1958, my father uproots my mother and baby me from Montreal to move to Miami, where there was zero family support or resources for whatever that would have been worth. She was isolated and abandoned in the usual way, left alone in a strange place for the next 5 miserable years. How selfish of my father. Although my grandparents had bred on an exponential level, leaving behind many dozens of uncles, aunts, and cousins, there would be no extended family or friends for me. I grew up isolated and trauma bonded to my mother. Later, my father would describe all his relatives as assholes, and most on my mom's side were unredeemable. My mother was in admiration of the biggest, loudest narcissist cousin among them, Francois. He came from a very violent home. A big drinker, he had 2 wives in one duplex. Both wives gave birth in the same hospital at the same time. Francois was a despicable charlatan with a hero complex, and my mother thought he was really great. His motto, never confess, even on your deathbed, you might get better. Wow. I was broken early. The dinner table was a war zone. I always had to eat my plate. Eating problems were planted here and haunt me until today, up and down the scale. Right now I feel deflated at the thought of telling all the stories. But here is one example from around age 4. The 3 of us were eating a rare meal together at the dining room table. My father's favorite spaghetti was not good enough. Where was the glass of cold water? This omission required a smack of his fist on the table for emphasis. The top glass smashed into 100 pieces, spaghetti, everything on the floor. I ran to my room and waited for my beating. Nothing happened. This is when I started to worry. Where did he go? Should I go out and look? Was he outside waiting to pounce? Was this a test? He was gone and my mother did not come to get me. I realized only recently dear mother had never tried to stop my beatings. Never. She would witness Mr. Tall, Dark, and Handsome follow her precious baby girl into her room, see the door shut, waited for the screams. This, like the many fist holes in the wall, is what passed for normal. At first, my father whacked my bottom, and I pridefully fought him by remaining silent. He won't make me cry. I learned quickly that the spanking stopped sooner if I cried, so I gave him his victory early. I was well into my 50s before I realized my mother could have helped, and she did nothing. Well, of course not, because she'd rather have him hit you than her. So it was only this week that another revelation hit. My dear little grandmother, where she once we moved back. Hold on. So it was only this week that another revelation hit. My dear little grandmother, where was she once we moved back to Canada? She was in a prime position to protect me, but chose to protect herself instead. The youngest of 7 children, grandmother showed clear signs of abuse. Timid, cold, unavailable, independent. She was afraid. She was a great fan of Ayn Rand. Rand gave her permission to put her needs first. She knew something was bad. She knew something bad was going on. I was a mess, even at age 6. Still, it was much too scary for her to be my defender. She selfishly chose to remain in her comfort zone and do nothing. Instead, I was grateful to have a place to go where my home situations got heavy. We could commiserate over Scrabble at how bossy my mother was and how loud and awful her boyfriend was. There was a trace of validation in these talks, so I completely overlooked the fact that she could have probed just a little further to get an avalanche of confessions. Yeah, they don't want to know. All she wanted whatever dirt she could use on your mother. I was bursting to tell, but I understood at a gut level she was helpless to intervene, too timid, too frail to even approach these bossy people. I wet my bed until age 13 when my period started and the child molestation stopped. This mother of mine ignored or rationalized away my obvious distress, and I was dismissed as a typical troubled teen. There is yet another story here. I hated the latest boyfriend so much, I held my breath in his presence so not to inhale any of his air. He spied on me, even recorded my private phone calls. Post-traumatic stress developed deep roots at this time. Hypervigilance too. I checked my closet every time I entered my room, and one day it paid off. Aha! The prick shouted as he burst out of my closet and passed it off as a joke. When we picked my mother up from work, he lied in front of me. I stayed at the far end of the station wagon, defeated, my mother taking in all the lies and saying nothing. I had zero self-esteem and the depression sank in for good. I was hopeless. I would never be understood. Later, I would crave alcohol daily at that specific time, 4 o'clock, and all the bells go off. At 13, I was identified as depressed. I was sent away for treatment. She visited daily for 2 months. I had never had such attention before. Still, all we did was chit-chat, nothing meaningful. She never came to a therapy session. Like a mother cat trying to rid herself of her runt kitten, she tried to send me to boarding school or to reform school or summer camp. Later, she tried to get me into the American Air Force in New York State. Ollie, at 17, I was already an alcoholic and had several paralyzing phobias. If I said yes, there would be no backing out. It was a trap. I knew I would never make it through boot camp. We moved every year for no good reason at all, and I attended 13 schools and had no friendships to protect me. All I had was this sweet, defective little grandmother for a safety net, and she failed her role miserably. Ollie, this mother of mine, forced me to live with that man and his 18-year-old son for 11 years, abused on trial from age 7 to 17 when we moved. When we moved, she would usually say, adult decisions are made for adults and children do not matter. She liked to say, I hate children who whine. When we saw a distressed child, I became withdrawn. And when the son, Peter, exposed himself and felt me up at night while I pretended to sleep, I said nothing. Sometime he would change my wet bed and I felt grateful. He was a fucked up, broken kid too. Meanwhile, his father was always making sexy jokes and finally acted out his urge to rape me when I was 17. I had been trained to protect the bad guy and so said nothing. It was my boyfriend who told my secret. My mother made a show of kicking the prick out, but he only when he moved across the street, and my mother stayed in contact with him. When she learned about Peter, she was angry and declared, to think I made a sandwich cake for his wedding. I am overwhelmed now by the number of sad situations that rush forth and beg to be exposed and validated here now. I want to tell all, but it feels like an impossible task. I need to be validated by someone who empathetically understands. That is you, Ollie, an enlightened witness. Today I see that my grandmother was in a position to do more. Why didn't I not live with her? Nope, she let me twist out in the storm. She was useless. One might even say she was complicit by her silence. This week I took down the 2 pictures of my mother's mother and threw away the pretty frames. Now the pictures go into a box of bad memories that hold childhood souvenirs. She was no friend of mine. I free myself from the lies and false impressions. She was just another broken child who would never come out from behind her tight-lipped character. She was pathetic. She knowingly let me rot in that horrible household, and never probed to learn what was really going on. I was bursting. In 1989, I moved to Germany and learned a lot about the horror and death camps and terror in the attic of Anne Frank. Being caught up in the Holocaust was horrible. Being raised by narcissists is worse. This is why. My experience lasted 18 years, and the effect continues today. In the camps, a grandmother would have been a comfort. Victims of the Holocaust were with other people. Victims were not alone. The victims were not alone. I'd be real careful of drawing comparisons like this. I get what you're saying, but I mean, it is dangerous comparison you're drawing here. And no one doubted who the bad guys were. Threats were blatant and the evil acknowledged in real time. Afterwards, there was no expectation to love the Nazis or to live with them while forced to downplay or deny their crimes. I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. Still, the mass extermination, I mean, it's... Yet this is what is asked of us. Grow out of it, forgive and forget, respect your persecutors. No one would say that to a Holocaust survivors. Survivors are respected, pitied, sometimes celebrated with museums and monuments. The Germans acknowledged their crimes and made some reparations. The worst Nazis were executed or jailed. It's illegal to deny the Holocaust. This is validation big time. True. True. I mean, it's you know, you got a valid point. You know, I'd still be careful drawing a comparison though, but I understand where you're coming from. None of this is available to the invisible child born into a narc fest. I was neglected and marooned in other people's self-serving nightmare. Thank you for being there, Ollie. I am and always been Diane, the Invisible. Well, what you realize here is that all these people would just change their costumes as they play a role. It's all fake. So you can never be saved by people who are only playing a role. Your grandmother couldn't save you because she was playing a role. Your mother was playing roles. These people are playing roles. They're actors. It's like wanting a movie hero to save you for real. It's not real. These people aren't real. Their abuse is real. But they're playing roles. And you can't be saved by something that isn't real. You can't be protected by something that isn't real. In order to be saved or protected or cared for, those are things that have to happen in reality. And the narcissist is doing nothing but performing. It's just abusive performance art. That's it. And that's what you realized about your family. So, I hope that helps. Thank you so much for your contribution and your story, Diane. Thank you to everybody watching. Please leave any opinions or advice in the comments section below. And again, if you want your story read on the channel, you have a topic you'd like me to cover, a narcissist you'd like to expose, you'd like to set up Skype, a phone call, have a private video made, or a Facebook live chat, or you'd like to sponsor a video like this for someone who needs help and can't afford it, or just make a contribution to the channel in general to keep it supported, growing, and expanding, because this channel survives 100% on contributions from all of you. Without you guys, all of this goes away. So if you like what you see here and you want to see more videos like this, or even a political video, you know what to do with the PayPal and email links in the description box. Also, please like and share this video wherever you can. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't, and be sure to click the subscription bell to be notified of all my video uploads. Losing my voice. I'm Ollie Matthews. This has been The Narcissistic Resistance. Thanks for watching, everybody.